Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll get started in just a minute with our webinar. Tonight, we're going to be talking all about collecting native plant seeds. Okay, I'm just going to put my phone on airplane mode. Okay, looks like it's 7 o'clock. We are going to get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. My name is Sarah Michehl. I am the Community Engagement Specialist with the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. And we're going to be talking all about native plant seeds tonight, how to collect them, store them, and sow them. That just means kind of fling them around outside where you're ready to grow them. We are a nonprofit land trust located about an hour northwest of Chicago. As a land trust, what we like to do is take care of land and preserve it. And we like to work with the private landowners who want to do the same thing. So we do that through a whole variety of ways. We do conservation easements. We do site visits for landowners to help them just figure out what to plant, how to identify stuff. We do a native plant, tree, shrub sale in the spring and fall. All kinds of different things that we do. I encourage you to visit our website, follow us on social media. If you are not already if you're not in McHenry County and you don't know who your local land trust is, just go to findalandtrust.org, type in your zip code and connect with them. Find out ways that you guys can support each other. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I will be going through that at the end. And I don't usually look through the chat box that much. Whatever, if there's time, maybe I'll scan through it. All right, so let's get started. First, native plants are plants that have grown in a certain region for a really long time, thousands of years usually, with no human intervention, okay? So why do we care about collecting them? I mean, we use them a lot in for restoration purposes. But for you as just a landowner, just a person with a yard, might be a normal size yard, might be, 100 acres. For you, collecting native plant seeds is really easy. You just need your hands and like a paper bag. This is a picture of my daughter here in the front sidewalk. She didn't even have shoes on. She's just pulling off some of the prairie drop seed heads there and dropping them in a bag. It's kind of therapeutic almost. It's really just very simple. And obviously it's budget friendly. I mean, you spend like $3 on one prairie drop seed and you're going to get, I don't know, maybe 100 seeds from that plant. So it's a potential of 100 new plants. So you're exponentially increasing your investment as well when you put these native plants in your yard and then collect their seeds. Even if you just have a small, tiny garden, it is very effective to spread seed. Now, you don't get 100% germination. So like every single prairie drop seed that you put down isn't necessarily going to germinate. Animals eat things, all kinds of things happen, but it is very effective in the long run to see what seeds do come up. And it's really educational when you start interacting like physically with your plants. It's really interesting when you start to learn about them. Before I forget, this recording of this program is going to be sent to you as well. Probably tomorrow, I'll send it out. All right, so before we dive into the individual plants and how to collect them, I want to talk a little bit about the ethics of collecting seeds. And don't get hung up on these numbers that you see on the left-hand side there, the 30%, the 10%, blah, blah, blah. Really, it's just about keeping this in the back of your head. So when you're collecting on your own property, technically there's no rules and you can collect whatever you want, okay, whenever you want. If you want to do it in an ethical way, that means you want to leave some seeds for wildlife to be able to eat. You want to leave some seeds to be able to just drop naturally or maybe blow out of your yard into other areas. Then if you're collecting from a perennial plant, we recommend you only collect 30% of the seed that you visibly see on the plant. Annuals, biennials, rare plants, we recommend only collecting 10%. And this isn't like you're out there counting to figure out what 10% is. It's just an eyeball of that, okay? Perennial plants are plants that come back every single year from the same root system. Annuals, they do not come back every year from the same root system. Annuals will create seeds, those seeds fall on the ground, and then it's those seeds that are going to grow. Okay, biennials are a little bit different. When a seed falls out of a biennial, it lands on the ground and forms just a little, what we call basal rosette, just a group of leaves on the ground. In the first year, it never produces a flower. The second year, that little group of leaves on the ground is going to produce its flower, make seeds, and then those seeds are going to fall on the ground, okay, and start that cycle all over again. Whatever. It's just important that you're not collecting 100% of all of the visible seeds that you can see. Leave some out there for wildlife to eat. That's a really important food source over the winter. If you're on public land, so a state park site or the roadside, that's like owned by, the county, or you're on a conservation district or forest preserve site, you cannot collect seed without permission. All right. You cannot collect seed from somebody else's privately owned property without permission. So just get permission from whoever the landowner is. And leave plenty for wildlife. All right, so this picture is my beautiful little niece, Isabel, and we were at my mom's house for something, and she's got a little bloodroot patch there, which is a cool wildflower, a spring wildflower, and we found the pods, and Isabel kind of went to town and collected all the pods, 100% of the pods, and put all the seeds in that little envelope. You could see down there in the bottom left. And when we figured out that we had accidentally collected every single bloodroot seed, we made sure to return some of those to that area to be ethical seed collectors and to make sure there were seeds that could still be collected and eaten by ants. And we're going to talk more about that. All right, so what do you need when you are collecting, seeds? I mean, really all you really need are some paper bags, and you can wear gloves too. I like thin gloves. A lot of these seeds are really tiny, so sometimes I don't wear gloves, but it just depends on what kinds of seeds I'm collecting. So really thin gloves that you can feel through are nice. Optional things that you can use, those are on the right side of the screen. You could use that orange-handled seed harvesting hook. That just allows you to grab a bunch of stems, and it's got a serrated edge, and just kind of cut through it. Cut through all the stems and get a bunch of seed heads at once. You can also just use some scissors, heavy-duty scissors for that. You can use a seed collecting apron in place of a bag. So that apron, that's just that white bag thing there on the bottom right, that's connected to a belt that clips around your waist. And it's nice because then your hands are free. You don't have to have one of those. I don't even personally own one of those yet. I just keep using grocery bags and hook my arm through the handles of the paper bags and hope they don't rip. You can use all different sizes of the paper bags too. That's nice. And the pliers and the rolling pin, that's for later on during processing. And we're going to talk more about that. That's just when you like rip apart the plant structures to get to the seed itself. And for every plant, for every species, it's a little bit different of how you do that. All right, so let's dive into the different family groups now. And once you start learning about these plants, and you're gonna notice patterns, and you're gonna notice like similarities. So all the milkweeds form some kind of a pod. And when the when the seeds are ripe, which just means that they are fully developed and ready to be collected or ready to germinate and grow into a new plant, those pods are going to start to split a little bit, and the seeds on the inside are going to be a dark chestnut color. If you look on the top left, that graphic where it says no and yes, you'll notice that where it says no, those seeds are really light colored. That pod is really green still. Those are not ready to be collected yet. That plant still needs to put more energy into the development of that seed. So under the yellow yes, exclamation point, those seeds are dark chestnut brown. And that pod, I'm guessing, had started to split open on its own a little bit too. If you don't want to wait for the pod to start to split open on its own, and you want to prevent that from happening, because what can happen is like the pod split, and then a couple days later, the fluff just starts blowing all over the place. And it's really difficult to collect those seeds in an efficient way. Some people will actually rubber band, you can see that on the bottom left, rubber band each little pod, which is crazy. I mean, I guess it's not crazy if you only have like 10 pods or something to do, but when you've got hundreds of them, like that's pretty time consuming to do something like that. What I like to do is just kind of watch these pods, and like, I don't know, I kind of just push on it with my thumb, and if it splits open really easily and the seeds are dark brown, I'll take that entire pod and just put it in a paper bag and close it. You can also see the one that's circled in the yellow there, that butterfly milkweed pod, like that one just split open. And so I would take it and just kind of run my thumb up through that. And then you can put the fluff, the seeds, everything into a paper bag. And when you're ready to separate the seeds out, what you can do is just put a couple of coins in there in the bag with the fluff and the seeds, and shake it around and clip a little corner, bottom corner of your paper bag. And those brown seeds are just going to be dislodged by the coins, and they're just going to fall out of that little hole. Or you don't ever have to separate them from the fluff if you don't want to. This is all really how much time are you willing to put into it. Okay. All right. You're gonna see throughout this webinar that I'm a low maintenance kind of seed collector. So I don't do a ton of processing, but it's whatever you want to do. Okay. So the next group we're going to talk about are the seeds that shatter. This is bottle brush grass, which is a savanna grass. It's So it grows in like oak savannas, which are just open, sunny woodlands. And plants that shatter, so seeds that shatter when they're ready to be collected, that just means that they literally fall off the plant. So you like brush against it and the seeds easily dislodge. They easily fall off. So it falls into the shattering group. This is one that's good to collect with, if I'm going to collect a lot of this, I'll have gloves on because it is kind of sharp. And I want to show you this little video here, how I would go about collecting it. Normally I would have gloves on when I do this. Oops, let me go back. Okay, here we go. So you start at the bottom, you run your hand up gently. I am not ripping the whole plant stem out of the ground. I am only collecting the seeds. And the seeds, if you look on the right where I have the little yellow circle, the seed is the yellow circled part, not those long protruding things. Those are called awns, okay? All grasses have awns attached to their seeds. Some are really long, some are super, super short, just depends on the species. So it's fun to start to learn like what actually is the seed structure itself. You don't have to worry about separating the seed from the awn in order for those seeds to be able to grow. I try to think about this in terms of like, what would happen in Mother Nature if people weren't here to physically remove that seed from the plant? How would it grow? How would it move around? You know, what would happen? And so you don't need to stress out really about this process and about, you know, really removing every single little piece from the seed itself. Nature takes care of it and does it for you. This seed is ready right now to be collected. It's been ready for a while, for like 3 weeks or so in August. And how do you know when it's ready? Well, when it just starts to fall off, when you touch it, a lot of these, this is going to be a recurring theme. How do you know when it's ready to be collected? It's going to look brown and kind of dry and crunchy. All right. And these make it real easy to tell because they just fall off when they're ready. Another plant that shatters are some of our shrubs like hazelnuts. Okay. And this is really interesting because a lot of times people forget about our shrubs and about collecting the seeds. And these are amazing landscaping shrubs. Even if you have just like a normal yard in a normal neighborhood, like a residential area, these make fantastic landscaping shrubs. Okay, anyway, and they make actual hazelnuts, which is really cool. If you've got at least like 3 of them or something, because they're wind pollinated. So anyway, you can see on the left, that's what the little cluster of hazelnut looks like when they're not ripe yet. I think that picture was taken in like late July, early August or something like that in 2020. So those not ripe. When are they ripe? When they start to look brown and crunchy. So look at the image up in the upper right there. You can see those eyelash looking things. They're called bracts. I can't say that word. Anyway, they start to get really brown and kind of dry and crumbly. And then the nut on the inside is that dark kind of brownish red color. Now, here's what can happen. This is what happens in my yard. The squirrels start taking them before they're ripe. They take them in like August. They taunt me and eat them on my deck, and they're like crunched all over the deck. So some people will collect them earlier, like in August when they're green, and lay them out on a tarp in the sun with air circulation. And I guess you have to lay them on a tarp in a place where the squirrels can't get them, right? Because otherwise it's just like a squirrel buffet. And and just let them ripen in the sun. And this is one that if it's hard to physically separate out the nuts, you can use a pliers to kind of break them apart. The other thing that happens is the squirrels plant these for you. And so occasionally you'll find a little baby hazelnut popping up, just like they do with acorns, and you find random oak trees popping up. That's cool too. Okay, so the next group we're going to talk about are plants with droops. All right, so droop is the correct botanical term for what you think is a berry. When you look at it, you're like, that's a berry. You see those bright red guys there? Technically, it's not a berry. So it's a fleshy structure surrounding one seed. That's what makes it a drupe, as opposed to a berry. I mean, think about a strawberry, right? It's got a fleshy structure and then a bunch of seeds on the external or outside portion. So that's a true berry versus these, which are droops, whatever, that doesn't matter for collecting purposes. How do we know when these are ready? So this is one of the false, like starry false Solomon seal or something. And you see this in the woods right now, which is pretty cool. In September, you see these bright red clusters that really catches your eye. And we know they're ready to be collected, well, when they're bright red, and they're going to be a little bit mushy to the touch. This brings up a good point that, again, some people react negatively. They can get a little rash or something from some of the juices and some of these droops. I've never really reacted to them, but some people do. So just wear some thin gloves, not a big deal. And you could see on the same cluster, there are some that are ready to be collected and some that aren't. So again, our 30% rule. Well, here's the thing. Let's say there was a big group of these plants all growing. I would only collect from 30% of the plants, and I would leave the rest of them fine. But on the individual cluster here, you can see I have ready and not ready written. The ones that are ready to be collected are bright red and are mushy when you touch them. Touch is really important to seed collecting and determining what's ready and what's not. The ones that are that mottled red and white color where it says not ready, when you touch them, they're going to be really firm. And plus they're not that deep red color yet. All right. And it's not a huge deal if you end up collecting a few that are not ready yet. Not the end of the world, you guys. You don't have to be perfectionists about it. And down in the bottom left, you can see what the actual seed itself looks like. All right. When you just kind of rub it up hard and remove that fleshy surround, it's just this little yellow seed. It's a hard yellow seed in there. Okay. Now, these are seeds that any seed that has this fleshy surround, we recommend that you direct sow it. That just means that you literally fling it out wherever you want it to grow right away. You can store it in a plastic bag in the fridge for a few days if you need to do that. Like say you're going to give them to your friend. That's fine. You can keep them in the fridge for a few days. You don't want to let these dry out. So that's the key. So think about this. And I think I talk about this in the next one. Yes. All right. So this is another one with droops, Jack in the Pulpit. How are these distributed in nature? So the shattering ones, those just fall off, right? When they're ripe. These, that bright red color entices animals to eat them. So then they go through that animal's digestive tract and they're exposed to moisture, they're exposed to acid and who knows what else in the animal's digestive tract. And then they're excreted out and that seed is left somewhere after having been exposed to all of those conditions. If you just take these droops and you just like leave them in a paper bag for 4 months, they're going to dry out and they're never going to be exposed to those conditions. And you're going to have very low germination success. So keep it simple, you guys. Just take them when they're red and like fling them wherever you want them to grow. And, you know, the next like 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, hey, they'll come up if everything works out. In this example, the Jack in the Pulpits, those dark green ones, those are not ready to collect. The dark reds are ready to collect. All right, so the next group is our coneflower group. And all right, these are super interesting because everybody knows the coneflowers, right? But how many of you have actually like ripped apart a coneflower head? And I highly just encourage all of you to start doing that. Start ripping apart your plants to experiment and to learn about them and just have like a little biology lab happening right on your kitchen table. So the picture in the center there, where it's on a white paper towel, that is a coneflower seed head that I cut in half. So here's the different structures. The very central cone is delineated by that triangle. That's what everything is attached to, all right? We don't visibly see that part. The seeds themselves is circled in yellow there. Those are what attach to the central cone. And then it's all the spiky parts are the external parts that we see and that you feel when you actually grab onto that cone head, okay, or that little whatever structure. Those are really spiky. And it hurts to just like grab them. So I suggest you wear gloves. How do we know when they're ready to be collected? They're going to look dry and brown and dead. I think you're probably getting the pattern here. Look down on the bottom right. Obviously, those are not ready to be collected yet. They still have the purple little petals, they're not petals, whatever, ray florets hanging off of them. The very center cone is very colorful, it has green and yellow and, you know, deep red purple on it. Not ready to be collected yet. That plant is still putting energy into the very development of that, of what is going to become that seed. All right. So the way I collect these when they're dry and brown and crunchy is I literally just take some scissors and just clip directly under the cone head itself and put the entire thing into a paper bag. And then later on, when it's time to process these, and I'm going to talk more about this, you have to separate, you don't have to, but you can separate those little seeds, which to me looks like a little tooth. You have to separate that from the surrounding plant material, which is called chaff. And you can do that. And people have all kinds of creative ways to do that with these coneflowers. People put them in a bag and just like stomp on them. You can I use pliers and like just rip them apart. There's all different ways. Or you can do none of that and literally just throw the entire seed head out into your garden. All right. And if you do that route, which sometimes I do end up doing because I've just run out of time and I want the seeds out of my house, it might just take an extra year or something for them to germinate. It might just take extra time for that little seed structure to be separated from the chaff surrounding it. No big deal. It's all whatever you have time for. Okay. All right, I think I covered everything with that. All right, our crumbly cone heads. These are some of my favorites to collect because they're very soft and fuzzy. And you don't need, I don't like wearing gloves when I'm collecting these because I like feeling them. So purple prairie, or any of the prairie clovers are an example of the crumbly cone heads. And how do you know when they're ready to collect? When you put your fingers at the very base of the seed structure there, when you pull up on them and they really easily dislodge and are fuzzy, kind of, they're ready to be collected. If you put your fingers at the base of that cone structure there and you pull up, if you meet resistance, they're not ready to be collected yet. Okay. And the rule of thumb on like when's it ready to be collected is it's usually around a month after all of the flower parts, like the flower petals, have faded. So, all right, it hasn't had flowers for about a month. It's probably ready to be collected. That's like the general rule of thumb. Okay. And the seed structure, the seed itself, if you look in the bottom left there, is found inside each of those little tiny gray fuzzy parts. All right. And you don't have to worry about removing those from the fuzz. It's not a big deal. I just collect those 30-ish%, put them in a paper bag, and then I throw those out over the winter, throw them out where I want them to grow. Okay. So I say seed found inside the fuzzy pod, no need to dehull, right? Dehull, that's just the plant material around the seed itself. You don't have to take that off with these. Okay, so our next group are the beaks. And these are really interesting. If you look at in that very center, or actually no, look at the picture towards the bottom left where it's in my hand, like laying in my hand, and there's a bunch of crumbly little seeds in my hand. I'm holding it like this. You can see the beak. That's super cool. So foxglove beard tongue or the penstemons are an example of these beak structures, the beak group. And it literally, when they're ripe, the beak opens. It's like a little mouth and it opens up. And these are very hard. All right. So right now, if you have penstemon anywhere in your property, they're just starting to open a tiny bit. I was just gonna mine, a bunch of them are still closed. But they'll open, that's when they're ready to be collected and the seeds just fall out, okay? And honestly, with these, you can collect them even before the beak opens, as long as everything is kind of, again, dry and brown looking. You can just clip with scissors underneath, like where all those little beaks end and it's just a stem. You can clip that with scissors and put the whole thing into a paper bag. And what I've done to open them is have all of the beak structures just like in a Ziploc. And then I take the flat end of a meat mallet and I beat it. I beat on it. And because they're super hard to open, like pop it open, like with your thumbnail or something. I can't do that. So I just use the meat mallet and just kind of beat it and all those seeds fall out and they're super tiny, as you can see there. So I just like gather them down in the corner, or you can do none of that and just chuck the entire seed structure out there. Okay. They have a weird smell when they're ripe. I don't know why. Yeah, all these penstemons have a weird smell. So if you keep them in like a bag or something, you're going to see that. The other thing is you hear me talking a lot about keeping these seeds in a paper bag. I recommend paper over plastic. Plastic just holds moisture in it and it promotes mold. So you just don't want anything to mold, okay, with our seeds. We want to keep them as dry as possible, unless it's those droops, right? That's direct sow those, just get those out on the ground. Okay, so another group are the shakers. And wild bergamot or monardas, all bee balm, or this one plant has a million names. These are an example of the shaker group. And what that means is once those petals, whatever, the florets, those little purple colorful parts fall off, you're left with that seed structure that you could see on the right there. And it's going to be, when it's brown and dry looking, you can literally take those and you can see all the tiny individual tubes. If you clip underneath, so like here's the seed structure, clip underneath it with scissors or whatever, and turn it upside down and just kind of tap it or squeeze it. And the little seeds are inside those tubes. So each tube is going to have a seed, and those fall out in your hand. And you can see in that picture with the ruler, the seeds are tiny. They're so small. So I'm just taking the whole seed heads, honestly, and putting them in a paper bag when they're, you know, brown and dry looking. And then I'm just like throwing the whole seed head out there because those seeds are so super tiny. The other thing about this plant in particular is how good these seed heads smell. I love this whole seed collecting thing is such a sensory experience. It's awesome. It's smelling, it's touching, it's all kind. I mean, you could probably taste some of them, but I don't know which ones are safe. So I'm not even going to go into that. But smell, like squeeze and smell these seed heads. It's like citrusy and minty. I love them. All right, so seeds that are fluffy. So this is different from the milkweeds. The milkweeds have a pod structure surrounding them. These, like Joe Pye weeds, asters, goldenrods, they fall into this category. They don't have a pod surrounding them. It's a seed attached to the fluff, all right? And then they just kind of fling and they just blow around when they're ready. And that's how we know when they're ready to be collected, when it's literally white and fluffy seed. And you don't have to worry about separating the fluff from the seed at all. I mean, most of these are super short, and I'm going to talk about this and show you in the seed sowing section of this, but you just kind of, if you're stomping them into the ground or laying them on the snow, they end up staying pretty well in place and sticking. The way I would collect this Joe Pye, and this is right now, I've noticed a ton of my Joe Pye out in the woods is fluffy like this. So what I would do is I would walk up to the plant, and you can see down at the very base of the plant with that picture on the right, all of those stems come to one central stem. I would clip it right at that central stem with scissors, and then I would take that seed head and all the fluff, and I would very carefully put it into an open paper bag with this fluff and the seeds down. Not with that up, because they're just going to fling out of the paper bag all over the place. All right. So just very carefully put it in there. And then I would collect a bunch of them, and I'll have them in the same bag. So this applies to a bunch of different things, like the goldenrods and the asters and the native thistles and anything with the fluff attached to it. It's not a milkweed. Okay. All right. Hitchhikers. So the hitchhiker group, you don't find a ton of these in people's like native plant gardens, but out in larger areas, like I have some of this desmodium in my like larger seeded lawn prairie area. It was in the seed mix. I think they're pretty cool. These things really stick, man. A lot of people hate hitchhiking seeds. They get on your dog, they get on your clothes. It's a genius seed dispersal mechanism, right? It makes sense. So with these, each little seed is located in those little pod structures there. They're called, what are they called? Loments or something? Yeah, a loment. If you look in the picture up in the upper left there, each little section has one little seed inside of it. How do you know when they're ready to collect? When they just like stick to you. They make it obvious when they're ready to collect. You don't have to worry about dehulling these, okay? Or like removing the seeds. I mean, these are seeds that can just be thrown out. Yeah, these are pretty easy to collect. They usually just do it for you. Ballistic seeds. This is my favorite. This is so cool. I know I already said that about a different group. These are seeds that just fling, catapult when they're ready to be collected and when they're ripe. Let me play this video for you. So neat. This is jewelweed. So cool. I'm going to play it again because it's so cool. All right. So you can see those are my daughter's fingers there. And a lot of jewelweed is ready now. Yeah, now-ish, maybe in another couple weeks. So when these seeds are ripe, the seed inside is ripe, anything that brushes against it or even doesn't brush against it, sometimes even with just movement of the seed pod, they're going to explode and just fling. And some of them fling their seeds up to 30 feet, depends on the species. It's super cool. All right. And there's a couple different kinds of plants that do this. Jewelweed does this. You find this growing in like wet, kind of disturbed areas. It's like in the culverts all around my neighborhood. Wild geranium, which is a spring wildflower, that is a catapulter or ballistic seed. Violets do this too. So does toothwort. Those are all kind of the spring plants. And then prairie phlox does it, or Phlox pilosa. That's a prairie plant. A lot of these were, some woodland guys, but prairie phlox will do it too. So it's really interesting. Now this one, these ballistic seeds, not so easy to collect. And so I personally have never tried collecting these, but people do it. And there's a couple different ways that you could do it. So you either learn the ripening sequence. So be like, all right, the flowers have faded. And so in like 3 weeks, I'm going to start paying attention because those pods are probably going to be ready to bust open soon. And so sometimes people will harvest them right before the explosion is going to happen. So maybe like 3 weeks after the flower fades. And then they keep them in a like mesh bag so that when they do ripen and they explode, they're inside a bag. Okay. Some people will cover the seed heads with some little like mesh bag situation that still lets air circulation happen and light get to it. That's important to allow like the ripening to continue to happen. And so then when it does explode, it explodes in the tiny bag. And then it's just really important that you're direct sowing or only holding these seeds for a few days. These are not seeds that can be held for like 4 or 5 months in a bag. Okay. So if you do let these explode in a bag and you've got the seeds, just put them out, within a few days or something. It just increases germination success. Okay, we're going to play a game. It's like a Zoom game. Whatever. It's not really a game. Ready or not. So with all of your newfound plant knowledge, I'm going to show you a series of images side by side, and I want you to determine from looking at them which one is ripe and ready to be collected and which one is not. Just yell out your answer. You don't need to put it in the chat or Q&A, whatever. Just yell it out. I'm going to tell you which one is right. Okay, here we go with our tall thimbleweed. Which one is ready? We have image number 1 on the left, image number 2 on the right. Image number 1, kind of greenish looking. Image number 2 on the right looks like a white fuzzy sweater. Okay, good. Number 2 on the right is ready to be collected. And again, you guys, it's looking kind of dry, right? It's kind of dry and fuzzy. There's another clue right there. And if we were able to like touch it and pull up on those seed heads, they're going to easily come off. Love it. That's one of the crumbly cone heads. Those are so fantastic. Whereas the one on the left, if I pull up on that, it's just green and it's like it's just stuck. It's not coming off at all. I meet resistance. You guys, here's the thing. These 2 plants right next to each other on the same day I took this picture. Yeah, they're like 2 feet apart. So that's super common. You're going to see that happen all the time. Some seeds are ready to be collected. Some aren't, whatever. I mean, here's my like theory about that. And this is just my theory. It isn't a fact of why this happens, but it kind of makes sense to have like the same species kind of ripening potentially at slightly different times, because maybe when the one on the right falls, it's like really good conditions, right? For those to be able to germinate. And then the one on the left, maybe those fall a little bit later and it's not quite as good conditions. So having a variety of slightly different times where these seeds fall just leads to better success, honestly, if you think about it. Better chances of success. Okay. Cone heads. Here we go. Coneflower. We have some Echinacea purpurea here. Which one's ready? So we've got number 1 on the left and we've got number 2 on the right. Which one do we think is ready to be collected? Yes, number 1. Number 1 on the left, dry, brown, dead looking, right? As opposed to number 2 on the right, has a lot of color left to it. All right, has literal purple little florets dangling still off of it. Okay, bright green stem. All the central cone portion there and everything sticking off of it, those are still like green looking. Definitely not ready to collect yet, as opposed to the one on the left, which I would just like grab that central cone and snip with some scissors and put the whole cone right into a paper bag. All right, Golden Alexanders. Number 1 on the left, number 2 on the right. Look really closely at the colors that you see on these. And yes, number 1 on the left is ready to be collected. So this is a shattering species. So number 1, if you like bump that, those just shatter. They just like fall. All those brown seeds just fall right into your hand. As opposed to number 2 on the right, look at all those stems, they're red. The seed structures, the seeds are green. If I like bump them, they stay attached to the plant itself. All right. So the physical interaction with the plant is another clue that I can't give you right here through Zoom, but also the color is a clue as well. All right, now here's a physical interaction. I can give you a clue with these prairie docks because I did it as a video. So here we go. Video on the left. Let me play it. Which one's ready here? This one. You can't tell by physically looking at these which one is ready, which one is not. You have to get up close and personal with these to be able to tell. It's these silphiums, prairie dock, compass plant, rosin weed. There's a bunch of them. Cup plant. All right, now let me play the video on the right here. Which one is ready to be collected? Yeah, okay, you get it. Yes, number 1, the first video. Makes it pretty simple, right? They fall right out when I run my thumb over it. What is the actual seed though? Look at the image in the bottom right. I have the seeds circled in yellow. The seeds, they look almost like sunflower seeds. It's not all those long, super skinny structures. All right. It's almost like a winged structure. That's the actual seed. Super interesting. All right. When you actually start deeply looking at these plants. All right. So how do we store these seeds? So seeds, here's the general rule of thumb. Seeds that you collect from July and later, it is okay to store them in a paper bag. I recommend that it's an open paper bag, and sow them. That just means fling them around over the winter. Okay. Unless it's a droop. The droops are those fleshy structure guys. Remember, we tell you just direct sow, just fling them out right away. Now, seeds that you collect in the spring, which is like going to be May or June, pretty much, those we recommend not storing them and direct sowing them. All right. And I'm going to go through some of those in a minute. This is really common sense. Don't let your seeds mold. Keep them in some kind of open-ish bag with some air circulation, paper bag, not plastic. All right. Keep it all away from rodents. I like to sometimes keep some species separated, whatever I label them. You could see sometimes bugs crawl out of them. If that makes you crazy, don't put them in a place where you're not going to like that. My seeds, I've tried to get better about not just having random bags of seeds all over my house, like the kitchen counter next to my husband's bottle of mezcal. So what I'll do is take all these littler bags of seeds and put them in one of those big landscape waste bags. Those are nice to collect all of these in and keep them in a central location. But leave them open so that air is like circulating through them, and then they're ready to be sowed in the winter. And I'm going to talk more about that. Seed processing. All right, guys, you can do as much or as little of this processing as you want. This is literally just the process of removing the seed itself from the surrounding plant structure, the chaff. All right. And I do this over the winter while like watching Netflix. And sometimes my kids help me, whatever. Sometimes they don't. Oops, let me go back. All right, here's a video of what I mean by processing. Here we go. This is some gentian, cream gentian. And this is my daughter literally just crumbling. Okay, crumbling. The dry seed structure and the seeds are just falling out into a bucket. Now, that remaining part that she already got the seeds out of, the chaff, I keep that. I am not just like throwing that in the garbage. A, there's probably seeds still in there. B, there might be cool beneficial insects in there too that are just like overwintering or something. I have a separate bucket that I put the chaff in, okay? And when everything gets distributed outside, the chaff goes out there too, okay? This is where you're using all different materials. You can use pliers to rip apart those coneflowers, or you can stomp on those coneflowers. I pretty much just use my hands or pliers. I mean, if it's more complicated than that, I'm, maybe just rubbing it, or I'm just throwing the whole seed head out, like wherever I want it to grow. Okay. You can like rub some of these over a mesh screen. Like you can get as complicated as you want with it, or you can be as simple as you want with it. It's up to you. All right. And really it's just about interacting with the individual plant structure and learning what is the best way to remove this seed from this chaff. Okay. And you don't always have to do that too. All right. So you can keep species separated if you want to. Be like, nope, I only want prairie drop seed in this bucket, and then sow that separately. Or you can put all of the species into one container. It's up to you. You know, so like, I'll be like, all right, I know I want all of these seeds to end up in the same spot. So I'm just going to process all of them into the same bucket. And it makes it simple for me to, you know, sow them. Or there have been times where I kept 2 species separated because I wanted to create a drift. I wanted to create a drift of a certain species. So I kept it separated. So do whatever you want with that. How do we sow them? How do we throw them out onto the planting area? First, gather up all your supplies. If there is snow on the ground in the winter, now winter is a great time to sow these seeds. So anytime, generally, we tell people fall, winter. So like October through the end of February is a great time to do it. I like to do it on top of the snow. And so I use like one of my kids' sleds to just pull all the materials out there. All right. And you can see in that bottom right picture there, I like to do it on top of the snow because I see the seeds. I see where I've already thrown them. And also you could see that like I got kind of lazy and just like threw an entire seed head out there. It's fine. Those are going to grow. It might just take an extra year. Not a big deal. All right. So fall, winter, best time. You could do it in spring and summer too, if you absolutely want to. Our native grasses do really well being sown in the summer, like spring and summer. They're warm season grasses. That just means they actively grow in the warm season. Whatever, you can sow them in the winter too. Don't get hung up on this, guys. Just keep it simple. All right. It's like make everything as simple as you can. One tip is if you're going to do a winter sowing, to flag the area first that you want to distribute your seeds, because you can't tell where that is once the snow covers it up. And you're distributing by hand. You're not using one of those like push seed things, whatever those are called. No, you're doing it by hand. Native seed is all different sizes and it gets clogged up in whatever that seed distributing thing is called. So do it by hand. And I try to divide my planting area into 4 or into 8, depending on how big it is. And then I'll divide my seed into 4 buckets or 8 buckets, whatever it is. And I just try to walk in straight lines, back and forth, distributing my seed. You can use a seed medium, a seed mixing medium if you want to. Some examples are vermiculite, rice hulls, leaf mulch, sawdust. That just means you put whatever the medium is, say rice hulls. You mix it in with your seeds and then you wet it a little bit and just mix it around with a wooden spoon, and it's giving your seeds a larger structure to bind to. So when you're flinging them out, they're not just like blowing away into your neighbor's yard. I've done it both ways. I've done it with a medium and without. It's really whatever you prefer to do. I'd say that like when you're first starting out, it's good to use a medium. Okay. If you're like an absolute beginner, just because it helps you distribute it more evenly, I think. That's the other thing about the snow. You can really tell like where you've already distributed it, as you can see there in the snow. Okay, seed takes a really long time to germinate. So don't expect to put seed down and then like the next year, like boom, instant garden. Like that's not how it works with seed. Different kinds of seed germinate at different times, and they have all different requirements to germinate. Some of them germinate the first year. They're like, whatever, I'm just going to grow right away. Some of them need to have their seed coat broken down a little bit more. So they might take 3 years or something. And you can speed that process up. It's going to be different for every different kind of seed species. So to find the different germination codes, there's a website and I give it to you at the end, but it's called Prairie Moon Nursery. So Prairie Moon Nursery, just Google that. And they've got the germination codes for every native plant species. And it'll tell you, like this one needs 30 days of cold, moist stratification. So if you're just like letting Mother Nature take care of that, you don't have to know that. You don't have to do any of that. All right. Nature's going to do it for you. Remember my point at the beginning. What would happen before people were here to make all this happen? Nature would take care of it. Those seeds would melt down through the snow. They'd be in cracks in the soil. They'd freeze. They'd thaw. They'd freeze. They thaw. They maybe get chewed on by some insects. And that's what takes care of the scarification and the stratification and all these things that are required. Or you can manipulate it and make it happen faster. That's a whole separate program. And that's actually something that I don't even do. So I'm not experienced with that. That's called propagation. Okay. I personally don't do that. I let nature take care of it and I'm patient. And I've had really, really good success with that as well, because I don't let weeds make seeds in my seeded area. So where I do direct sow, these seeds, I don't let weed plants, non-native weed plants, make seeds in there to compete with my native plant seeds. And I do that in a whole variety of methods. I'm like either just breaking off flower heads. Sometimes I'll mow the entire area if it's super bad. I'll use a string trimmer and just kind of weed whack those seed heads down, all kinds of different things. But just don't let weeds make seeds in your planting area. All right. What time is it? Okay, I'm going here. I'm going fast. Let's cover some spring and early summer blooming wildflowers. People always forget about these because they're like, they only pay attention to them when they have flowers on them in like April and May, and then they just forget about them. And you know what? You guys don't forget about them because for one thing, these plants are really, really beautiful. And for another, it's extremely interesting. A lot of these are going to have elaiosomes attached to them. All right, let's talk about what that is. So we're looking at bloodroot here, and it makes a pod about a month after those beautiful white petals fall off. A pod is going to form. So this is going to be in like May or June, depending on the year when these pods are going to form. Now, look at those dark chestnut seeds. Do you see those little white worm-looking things? They're attached. That is called an elaisome. That's basically like this fatty protein-filled structure that's attached to the seed itself. Ants want the elaisome. So they're going to, like one ant is going to take one seed and in its jaws, and the species of ant matches the size of that particular seed from bloodroot, super cool. And it's going to take that seed down into a tunnel and underground, and it's going to eat the elaisome, and it's going to throw away the seed. It doesn't want the seed itself, and it's going to discard it in a waste chamber section of the ant tunnel that has like dead ant bodies and like excrement in it. And it's the perfect fertilizer ever for that seed to grow. So there's a bunch of different woodland wildflowers that depend on ants to kind of move their seeds around. And that's how they distribute. So you're just looking for these pods, and when you split it like a tiny bit, when you squeeze it, the seeds are going to be a dark chestnut color, and it's usually a month after those flower petals have faded away. Spring beauties, they also have a little elaiosome attached to their seed. These are a beak. See the little beak structure there? Super beautiful. So those seeds fall out when they're ready, and they have an elaiosome to encourage those ants to move them around. Okay. Wild ginger. This one's tricky because the seeds are in the back section of the flower structure. So if you look at that picture on the left-hand side on the top, when that flower, that reddish, that's the flower, that reddish structure, when that fades away and it's like mushy and kind of decayed a little bit, if you take your thumbnail and you just rip open the back, like the bottom, not the flower, but the bottom section of it, that's when you're going to find those little seeds with the elaisomes. Super cool. All right. Direct sow all of these spring guys. That means just put them out right away, throw them out, fling them around. All right. Prairie smoke. Everybody should have prairie smoke in your yard. If you've got some sun and it's not standing water, put some prairie smoke in. It's a perfect little landscaping plant. So pink flowers, it's what it looks like on the left. On the right, about a month after those flowers fade, so this is usually in June, fuzzy white smoking structure. Oh, it's so beautiful. When you pull on those little fuzzy, they're called achenes, whatever. When you pull on that, the little ripe seed, when it easily dislodges, ready to be collected. And you can collect a bunch of it, like I've got right there. Direct sow these, like just put them right into the ground where you want them to grow. I don't even remove the fluff. Like I don't have time for that. Okay. Just like press them right into the ground. Don't hold on to them for a long time. This is how you're going to get the best germination. Okay. All right. So different land trusts do different things. We have a fall seed sharing event that we do for our members. So if you're not already a member, become a member. All right. This is a fantastic way to learn about seed collecting and to get some free seeds. Like this doesn't cost any money. It's super cool. So go to our website. You know what, you guys, in the follow-up email that I'm going to send you, I'll send you the link, like directly to how to register for this and how to become a member if you're not already a member. You can also bring pre-collected labeled seed to share if you have some, and only native seed. That's what we want. If you don't have any to share, that's fine. We want to like help you. We want to help you get started. Okay. And we do like a potluck and stuff, and it's super fun. And we do a whole question and answer conversation afterwards. And yeah, it's a whole thing. All right. So resources, here's a bunch of different resources. I talked about Prairie Moon. Here's where you can order seeds too. There's 3 different places that you can order native, Midwest, local seed. All right. And plus you can just look at their websites and learn about them too. If you want to learn more about gardening and using seed in a larger scale, that book, Garden Revolution, is amazing. Okay. I learned a ton from that. And it's all just about like ecological landscaping. That's a fantastic book. And then pretty much the most important resource on this entire page is under other. And it's the Field Museum Guide to Seed Heads of Common Native Plants of the Tallgrass Region. All right, I'm going to send you a direct link to the PDF files for all of these, okay? This is an amazing resource put together by the Lake County Forest Preserve District together with the Field Museum and some volunteer seed collectors from Northern Illinois. It is amazing. Every habitat type, it's got a guide for it. And it tells you each individual plant, when is it ready to be collected, and what does it look like, and how do you collect it, and what group is it in? Is it a shatterer? Is it a beak? Is it ballistic? Like, what is it? And it's in plain language. Okay, so this, and it's free. This is a free resource. This is amazing. So I'm going to send you, don't worry about writing that link down. I'm going to send you in the follow-up email a direct, like, because I downloaded all the different guides. So a direct link where you can click on those and download them yourself. Okay. All right. We run a Facebook group called Learn. So the Land Conservancy of McHenry County, we run a private Facebook group called Learn, Landowner Ecology and Restoration Network. Whatever, you can post your questions on that. What's this plant? Whatever, all those kinds of questions. And we moderate it. It's a very drama-free group. It's great. Great way to learn. Okay, I'm going to go through the Q&A box. Gary, any suggestions for propagation of butterfly weed? Milkweed pods have not opened yet on my butterfly weed plant. Any help is appreciated. All right, Gary, butterfly weed is interesting because I still have some blooming in certain areas of my yard, which is weird. But then I've got others that the fluff is like flinging all over the place already. So let's think back to the milkweed section. That was the very first slide I showed you, and the strategies for that. Okay, so let me see if I can go, if it'll let me go back. It will. All right, so I'm going to go back to the very beginning. We're going to look at the milkweed. Here we go. So picture on the right is butterfly weed. Watch them, Gary. So watch those seed pods. When they start to be slightly brown, and when you squeeze on them and they pop open real easy, and the seeds are dark brown, that's when you can collect them. Okay. Now, propagation is a whole other subject. So, and I'm not even going into propagation. Propagation is when you're taking those seeds and you're literally planting them in some kind of seed starting medium, like potting soil or whatever, something like that. And you're keeping them, over the winter, and you're doing all that, you're growing them into a seedling. That's propagation. That's a whole other subject. I'm teaching you tonight on how to just take these seeds, collect them, and then scatter them outside. All right. So here we go. Here's the answer right here. All right. All right. Perfect. And all right, Casey, you mentioned leaving seeds in a bag for 5 months. Is there a max amount of time seeds can be kept in bags before sowing? For germination, do they have an expiration date? Some do, some don't. So to be safe, your seeds that you've collected that are ripe from July through October, those you can keep in a bag, until, you want to get them out by February, right? So they're not going to necessarily be in there for super long, but just get them out by February. All right. Try to get them out like the next season after you collect them. So you collect them like July through October, try to get them out November, December, January, February. Sow them then. All right. Now, sometimes people are like, oh, and I've done this. I just found a bag of seed that I forgot about, and it's in my closet. And it's like a year later. Can I sow that? Some of them, yeah, you can. Who cares? Just put it out. Like, it's not going to hurt anything, right? So just put it out. Some of them will have success. It literally just depends on the species. Okay. But for the rule of thumb, collect it in like July through October. keep it in a air circulated paper bag situation, get it sowed that fall or winter. Okay. Will my butterfly weed come back if it doesn't drop the seeds? Yeah, it's a perennial. So even if it doesn't make any kind of flower or any kind of seed pod, yeah, it's going to come back next year. All right. So like if you just planted it, you know, in like August or something from a live little plug and it never flowered and it never made a seed pod, it'll come back next year because they're perennials. All right, Danelle, if I want my flowers to be clumped in groups instead of growing willy-nilly all over, what's the best way to do that? You need to keep your species of seeds separate then, all right? So instead of when you're processing, so first of all, when you're collecting them, keep them species separated in little bags. And when you go to sow them in the winter, do drifts. You're going to have better success with drifts necessarily than like clumps, little neat clumps of like 3 plants. It's not that targeted with seed, but you can do, you know, kind of drifts. And I've done this and have pretty good success with it, especially with butterfly weed, where I've made like drifts of butterfly weed by holding those seeds separated and then, you know, scattering them separately in a design. You can do that. Danelle, should we broadcast seeds in the fall or winter? Either, anytime between October through the end of February. Harley, when collecting, how do you estimate percentage? You just eyeball it. Don't worry about the specifics, literally eyeball it. Okay, so if you're looking at a group of butterfly weed, a bunch of butterfly weed with all these little pods sticking up, only collect 30-ish%. So collect a third of them and literally just eyeball that. All right. Yeah, don't get hung up on like the exact, you don't have to count or anything like that. Okay, Sashi, this is my first time planting natives using seeds. Can they be planted in the fall? Yes, October through the end of February, you can scatter them. Is there anything special needs to be done for prep? No, there is not. No, you don't have to do anything special. Don't worry about it. Just throw them out there, surface broadcast. So you're literally just throwing them on the surface of the ground. Now, it's important, and this is a whole other program, but it's important that wherever you're scattering these seeds, you're going to have best success if you've prepared the site ahead of time by removing weeds and dealing with weeds and dealing with competing vegetation, right? So, I mean, you can interseed, and I do this every year. I do both every year. Like I interseed into existing plantings because I want to increase the diversity. So I'm just like throwing my seeds into all the stems and dead stuff. Yep, I'm doing that. But I'm also, if I have a brand new area, I've spent the whole growing season killing the plants, like the weeds usually, or the lawn or whatever it is that you're converting. I've spent the whole year killing that stuff, whether it's with herbicide, whether it's with smothering, whether it's with cutting the sod out, whatever method you choose. And then I've got just bare ground and I'm direct sowing my seed onto that. Okay. Okay. Do I put down new mulch every year? Okay, so Danelle, I don't put mulch down at all, like ever. I guess when you're first starting out with a brand new garden and you plant live plugs of plants, that first year, if you want to put some mulch down around the live plants, the little live plugs, you can do that. And it could be leaf mulch or you know, I guess you can use wood mulch if you want to. You don't have to though. And then after that, your goal is to not ever need mulch. Your goal is to have really thick, densely layered plants. So your plants are the living mulch, basically. It's fantastic. You don't have to buy mulch every year and you don't have to spread it all over the place. So I am a big advocate for no mulch. John, tips for wild plums and crab apples. All right. So John, if this is John Split, if that's who asked that question, I'm going to post that and learn. I haven't done those yet. People have different methods for those fruit, like trees and shrubs and stuff. And so post that question in our Learn Facebook group. It's funny because the plums are crazy this year. And there's like a ton of plums that are ready to be harvested right now. All right, Casey, I'm in Chicago and short on space, but I have a thriving native garden. Good for you. A lot more seeds than I'm able to use and have space for. Are there other places for donating seeds outside of your seed swap that you would recommend? Yeah, Casey, find your local land trust. So in Chicago, you would be probably Open Lands, I would guess would be your land trust. And so you can start there with Open Lands and see, a lot of times they'll have a program called Conservation at Home. So we run a group called Conservation at Home here in McHenry County. I know they have it in Cook County through like the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, partnered with Master Gardeners, I think. But anyway, they share, sometimes we share seeds and stuff like that. You can also reach out to your libraries. Sometimes libraries have seed swaps. There's a couple different Facebook groups that cover Chicago. So there's one called like Northern Illinois Native Plant Gardeners or something like that. So you can post on those Facebook groups and just be like, hey, I've got seeds. Who needs these? Offer them to some neighbors too, you know? So those are just a couple different places that you can reach out to. And that's amazing that you want to do that. And that is such a great way to connect with people through these seeds, right? Which is very, very cool. All right. I think I got all the questions. Except for John's question on wild plums and crab apples. I don't know, John. I want to know that too. Usually I just let animals do it. All right, let me see in the chat. All right, perfect. I got all the questions. All right, so you guys are going to be emailed this recording like tonight or tomorrow or something like that. Reach out if you have any questions. Find your local land trust, become a member. We're all nonprofits. We depend on member support. Okay, get involved. Sign up for the e-newsletter list, volunteer, become a member, donate money, attend a program, whatever works for you. We appreciate you. We appreciate our community. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Everybody have a great night and enjoy your seeds. Interact with those plants. Thanks, guys. Bye.